So as we go into the text itself, the actual, chapter 1 of Revelation, we've kind of established kind of the apocalyptic literature, and we've kind of established some contextual things. We've got two more things to talk about with regards to context, but I really just shared the whole chapter with students, encouraged them to read it carefully, look at the themes, ask good questions, make good observations. One of the first things we talked about, and we reinforced this, that it is the revelation of Jesus Christ. So the revelation is coming from this person, Jesus, who's fully God, fully man. He sees reality truly for what it is, and he's revealing to us this picture of what's really going on. So it's his revelation, and John is the one writing the revelation down. You pick up this seven churches, seven spirits theme, and with the churches comes the understanding that the first century church was in the midst of something like a persecution, like a general persecution. And then there were specific persecutions that happened that were more profound. And that John is writing this in the context of that persecution. And he's not writing it to one church. He's writing it to seven churches. And I think that is an important point to draw out. It's a congregation of churches. It's not just this church in Ephesus. It's not just this church in Smyrna. John is here on the island of Patmos, and he's looking out at the coast, and he's looking at the church. I think that's an important thing. He's going to say that he has made us a kingdom of priests. We'll come back to this. But again, persecution is part of the theme, not the theme. Persecution is part of the setting of this. We even see it here in how from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, this word is the word for martyr. We see that John encourages these churches that he is their brother and fellow partaker in the tribulation and the kingdom and the perseverance, which are in Jesus. Again, Jesus is the one holding everything together. Colossians 1:7 idea there. In him all things hold together. It doesn't qualify that in Colossians. It's like all things. There's no quantifier there that says some things. It's just all things. All of reality is held together by this person, Christ. It's also interesting that he doesn't overlook the tribulation. We're looking at the kingdom. We do need perseverance. And in the midst of the tribulation, understanding the kingdom is how we persevere. But it's also not just individually. And this is something we need to point out for students and kind of in our modern culture. We often think of the Bible as personal application. What does this mean personally to me as an individual? That's not a bad thing. But John is addressing churches. He's addressing the community of faith and this kingdom of priests. And what we see is that Jesus is the king. We see that right here in verse 5. And so the sort of the tribulation is another piece of context that I drew out for our students. And pointing out that John actually begins this chapter with a whole lot of hope and a whole lot of like pointing to Jesus. We're not really focused on the tribulation. We're sort of acknowledging that there is persecution going on or there's hardship going on, but we're really pointing, John is pointing our attention to Jesus in this vision. He says he's the king here, and this is the second point of context that will help us jump into the book of Revelation. So there's persecution, and yet we're able to look past that persecution. Then there's this, Jesus is said to be a king here in verse 5. And this 7 stars and the 7 lampstands. He says, as for the mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, and the 7 golden lampstands, the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands are the 7 churches. Now, there's a lot going on here. And to Jesus, who's a Jew, to John, who's getting this revelation, who's a Jew, the 7 lampstands would be an immediate clue as to where Jesus is and what he's doing. He is, we know he's a king here, but he's acting like a priest here. What I mean by that is Jesus would have been standing in the midst of the temple. The menorah with 7 lampstands is here. It's in the temple. And the priest's job is maintaining these lampstands. Hopefully you can see that well enough. Here's another. You see this menorah is sitting here, and there's 7 lampstands as you go into the Holy of Holies. This is where Jesus is in the Revelation. He's here, and he's about to prepare this lampstand for a festival, for a celebration, for a feast, for a ritual. So in the midst of this persecution, you have the priest, who is also the king from verse 5, preparing the sanctuary, preparing this holy place for a festival. He's going to begin to maintain the lights of this lampstand, and that's the 7 churches, right? This community of churches is about to be sort of pruned or maintained. You can see that later on as Revelation goes. He's going to tell these churches, hey, you did this good, but you didn't do this good. And he's going to cause their light to shine. He's going to wake up that fire in these churches. And so what does this mean to me? And again, we often will think of this as a personal application, but this application is really for the church. It's my personal application is, where am I in this kingdom of priests? Who am I in this kingdom? We see that Jesus is the king, he's the priest, but he sort of made us into this kingdom of priests. The church, it isn't just one church. It's a whole body of believers that are represented all over the globe with all kinds of diversity. And yet Jesus is the one who can hold this together. And I think the encouragement is, one, if you are in tribulation, if you're in a time of persecution, if you are in a dark and chaotic world, you cannot endure alone this perseverance, right? You cannot endure alone. So first, you need a community. Well, maybe not first, but you need a community of believers. You need to be participating in this kingdom of priests. You also need to be ministered by this kingdom of priests. So your community is going to be key for the church's ability to endure that persecution. And we've seen that 2,000 years later. Here we are. Rome is, for all intents and purposes, gone, and others who have persecuted the church for all intents and purposes have gone, and yet the church endures. Why? It's a community of priests. Now, the other thing is, you have a king who is king and ruler of all. He is the king, he is the priest. And if you look at this whole next section here, John gives us what he's seeing, and he's showing us Jesus in this amazing way. And so the sort of first takeaway is you got to have community. The second takeaway is you have to have a real vision of Jesus. You cannot have a pretend Jesus. If our faith is built off of a pretend Jesus, then our very real circumstances are going to come in and knock over that pretend Jesus. But if we have a real, full understanding, or we're getting to a full understanding of who this person is in his glory, and that is the person we're putting our faith and trust in, then no amount of circumstances could ever come into my life and overtake that. And we can endure. Now, the thing that I encouraged our students about is Jesus allows us to endure our circumstances not often by changing our circumstances, but by transforming us. He's powerful enough to do that. And so that's kind of there's so much here, so keep looking at it. But particularly, you're teaching this to students, or you're talking about it around the dinner table, and you sort of have to pick and choose what you focus on. And so I think, again, just seeing Jesus for who he is, and this encouragement about community is key. It's really key. And the seven lampstands, we will unpack that kind of in the next part of this. So catch you in the next one.